There you go.
Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hello, good
Hi,
morning,
Debbie.
everybody. It's so good to see you all.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody.
Welcome to our session this morning on high leverage teaching strategies for remote learning through an equity lens. I'd like to introduce myself. Oh, sorry. We may have some glitches today. Okay. So my name is Julie Calderon. I'm the Director of World Languages for Boston Public Schools. And I would like to introduce my co-host, Akila Cobham, who is a teacher leader in the District of Spanish. This session is being recorded. When we break out into breakout rooms, the recording will not be in your breakout rooms. It's only when we are all back together that the recording is taking place. And that's for our colleagues who aren't able to make it today. They'll be able to view this asynchronously. So throughout today's presentation, you will see lots of links to the slides. We've included a lot of rich resources that we hope will help you throughout the school year. And again, because our session today is 75 minutes, we're not going to be able to take the time to go through each link, but we do encourage you to take a look at those links after and use whatever works for you. So, we are grounding today's PD in the district's priorities for this year, incorporating culturally and linguistically sustaining practices throughout all our lessons, and affirming the racial identity of our students.
Okay, so here are the agreements for today's learning session. We kindly ask that you stay muted unless it's your turn to speak. Drop any questions you may have in the chat below, and we'll do our best to answer them during today's PD time. And then lastly, please, at the bottom of your Zoom menu, you'll see a reactions tab. Feel free to offer any nonverbal communication by using the reaction button.
Building off the BPS strategic vision, today's focus is on how world language classrooms can effectively engage learners using high-level practices embedded in a culturally and linguistically sustaining practices framework remotely. And going forward, that's a mouthful. We're going to be saying CLSP instead of culturally and linguistically sustaining practices. So when you hear us say that, that's what we mean. Take a moment to read and reflect on this quote. We want to ensure that every child in BPS is entitled to an equitable, rigorous, and high-quality education. In alignment with the Boston Public Schools' overarching mission, here are 6 commitments that BPS has promised the Boston community. And I'll just pause for a few seconds. You can read these as well.
Is there a volunteer to read this quote aloud for us?
I can.
Oh, thank you, Chelsea.
I'm Chelsea Cohen. I teach at the O'Brien. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his own language, that goes to his heart. Nelson Mandela.
Thank you. So this quote boldly expresses the value of learning another language and the importance of our work as language teachers. Using his words to speak truth to power, Mandela made visible his personal struggles against oppression. By learning the language of his oppressor, Mandela believed language could be used as a tool to fight racial inequality. Therefore, our responsibility is not just to teach language. In Mandela's words, we teach language to expand students' worldview and subsequently help them develop anti-racist attitudes and behaviors. Inequity in education is divisive and corrosive. To disrupt inequity in the world language classroom, we should focus on what our students know. Furthermore, we have to do an honest reflection check. How do we show up to our students? What about our behaviors and beliefs reveal bias and create inequitable learning experiences for students? To actively resist the unspoken inequities that reproduce systemic oppression in world language classrooms, we are suggesting that we employ a proficiency-oriented method of instruction. So what about proficiency-led instruction makes it equitable? By being proficiency-focused, we emphasize communicative tasks for context and purpose. Organizing instruction in this way motivates students, encourages their personal responsibility for learning, and improves their confidence in communicating in the target language. So what is a proficiency-based approach? Well, use the ACTFL can-do statements to discover where students are along the continuum of language development. Then, design instruction at one level higher than students' current comprehension of the target language in order to move them forward along the proficiency scale. This planning occurs in a cycle. First, start with 1 or 2 clear communication objectives. Use your knowledge to design measurable tasks, analyze instruction and students' performance, and whenever possible, collaborate with colleagues to share knowledge and problem solve. Then repeat. Our standards indicate we should use the target language with our students as much as possible in order to improve their proficiency skills. Proficiency, growth in world language, is about preparing students to communicate across 3 modes: interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. To do this, students need comprehensible input, or CI. CI provides students meaningful interactions with the target language they can understand. Now, let's watch a short video to see an example of what I mean.
So, what exactly do I mean by the fact that you don't need to speak Spanish to understand Spanish? So to illustrate what I mean, I'm going to give you 3 messages. They're all the same, but I'm going to deliver them in 3 different ways. And I want you to see which message you actually understood or which approach helped you understand. So, okay, I'm going to say the message the first time. En mi casa yo tengo 3 perros. El grande se llama Troy, la mediana se llama Helen y el pequeño se llama Achilles. Number 2, second approach. En mi casa yo tengo 3 perros. El grande se llama Troy, la mediana se llama Helen y el pequeño se llama Aquiles. Approach number 3. En mi casa yo tengo 3 perros. Perros. El grande se llama Troy. La mediana se llama Helen. Y el pequeño se llama Achilles.
Okay, so you see, when we use CI to drive proficiency-based instruction, the learning environment is leveled so that all students can develop, thus creating a standard of equity in our class. Raising the standards for equity in our classes is a necessary action. Additionally, we need to norm and model equity for our students. Here are 4 concrete actions to take in order to eliminate bias in the classroom. 1, be reflective about the types of representations you use in the classroom. Are they diverse, varying and showing a range of racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, lifestyle experiences and interests? 2, teach about colonization. 3, acknowledge and recognize the voices of underrepresented people. 4, promote social justice. Silence or neutrality is not an option.
The BPS Office of Opportunity Gap has curated these resources to support educators to learn more about racism, equity, and social justice issues. And you can see the link at the bottom of the screen where the list of all the resources are. Feel free to take a look at those after the session. Many of you may be familiar with Ibram X. Kendi's work. He is one of America's foremost historians and leading anti-racist voices. This summer, he assumed the position of director of the Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University. His latest work from 2020, How to Be an Anti-Racist, is a New York Times #1 best-selling book and is Kendi's most popular work thus far.
At this time, we will separate you into breakout rooms to share with colleagues. We would like for you to discuss the following. Share about a time you experienced racism in a world language instructional setting. Then, come up with one action you will commit to in order to design a learning experience for your students that is anti-racist. You will be notified when there are 2 minutes remaining for this activity, and Zoom will automatically return you to the main session. Before you return as a whole group, please elect a representative to share out a summary of your conversation. Importantly, be prepared to name 1 or 2 actions you plan to take so that your classroom is an anti-racist and unbiased learning space. Are there any questions before we break out? Okay.
That was a good chat room. I got in touch with someone from Fenway High. That's Are we done with the-
Julie,
Yes.
so we kind of wanted more time, but are you able to send us back to the same rooms?
Well.
If not, we'll just move forward, but in our group was still kind of just getting warmed up. What about other folks? Did you guys think you needed
Same.
more
We
time?
We
needed
needed
more
a few more
time.
minutes.
Yeah.
10 more, how many more minutes would you like?
I
At
think,
least 3, 4.
yeah, how about we just say 5? That way we can just
5
get our
minutes,
summary,
yeah.
yeah. But I don't know if we can
will-
go back to the same rooms.
Well,
That's the only thing.
I will do my best.
Okay.
Okay?
All
If
right.
not, then it is what it is.
Okay, how about this,
Sorry.
just to preface it, if we go back and we're in different groups, can we just transition to the second part to come up with action steps? That's where we left off. We didn't get to talk about the action plan. So maybe that could be the focus if we don't end up in the same rooms.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, I will do my best to make that happen. So
okay. Thank
let
you.
me do that now. Okay, it looks like everybody has rejoined us. Here
Yes.
we are. Okay, excellent. So,
Thank you for the extra 5 minutes.
Of course. So I'm just going to put Miss Senora Finley on the spot because I know she volunteered to share for our small group. So, and I know that she's really ready to go, so she can be first, Julie.
okay, Miss Finley, could you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Hola.
Thank you. So how can we as world language teachers further our work to eliminate discrimination and racism that may be evident in our classrooms?
We talked in our group about a couple different things, and we talked about doing things like discussing and setting a purpose for learning Spanish, why learn Spanish, and embedded in that conversation was a real world purpose for learning Spanish. Mariana, one of my colleagues, talked about how students get to an opportunity to possibly be a tutor at the end of the first year of Spanish. So that's an amazing real world and purpose and incentive for really applying yourself to the class. We talked about teaching unit 0, which my school calls it, the first unit, which is setting the tone for culture and how we talk about other people's culture, deconstructing the idea of the other, and allowing students to shift their perspective, like creating lessons that allow them to take someone else's perspective. And I don't think I mentioned it in my group, but briefly I talked about grouping, doing random equitable groupings. Did I miss anything, group?
Well done.
That's excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, someone else. You could raise your hand. I can see you in the list here. Is that okay? And if someone could raise their hand, I will be happy to.
Yeah, I see Chelsea and also Magda had her hand raised.
Oh, good. Okay, Chelsea, if you could unmute yourself. There you go. Thank you.
And then after Chelsea, then Magda's after Chelsea.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
So in my group, we talked about a lot about kind of building that foundation. So in terms of creating classroom norms, rules, and expectations, really focusing on tolerance, respect as part of that, and maybe framing it in a conversation about community values around the world, and really focusing on building relationships and creating a space where students feel safe talking about issues of racism, not making assumptions, and kind of confronting our own personal biases. Talked a lot. Making a concerted effort to include stories from around the target language world, and being willing to explicitly talk about colonization, racism, colorism, whether it's an official capacity through like a project or some sort of curricular goal, or in an unofficial capacity if it comes up in conversation with students, being willing to kind of stop, talk about it, name it, and work through those as a community.
Okay, thank you so much. Excellent points. Magda.
Yes, hi Julie.
Hi, Magda.
Hi, and hi everybody. I know some of you know me already. Yes, so I was with, I shared the room with Miss Gonzalez, and she's also coming from Puerto Rico. We had a beautiful conversation. When two Puerto Ricans get together. So anyway, so we were talking about how sometimes our situation, it is based on our experience, maybe at work, or maybe in other settings, it is hard for us sometimes to see that people have a trust, that they trust us, and how sometimes we feel that we have been discriminated, maybe by colleagues or other adults around us on the different settings. And how can we overcome those challenges, and to keep ourselves positive all the time, and also to try to move forward, to do not let that to keep us away from doing our job. In the classroom, how can we do to build relationship in the classroom with the students, to listen to the students, to be aware if any situation is in the classroom. I think it is important for every teacher to listen to the students, or maybe any comment or how they interact with each other. Or maybe in our case, we had students who come from our own countries of origin, or we share the same culture. So we need to be aware of what the student feels about it, because we have witnessed how students in our own classrooms have been discriminated. So we need to keep our eyes on those students, and how can we have a successful year with the students.
Okay, thank you so much, Magda. In the interest of time, we will have one more person, and then we can come back to the identifying action steps at the end of the presentation if there's time. So Denise, you have your hand raised. If you could go ahead and share. Would you be able to unmute yourself? There you go, I've unmuted you. All right, Denise, please. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So in my group, I was with Ms. Capucci and Ms. Grasso. We had one more person who left, so I don't recall her name. And we discussed the importance of addressing language versus ethnicity versus race. Like, who is it that speaks the target language? And in order to do that, it requires that we are more than just language teachers. We also have to put on our history hats on in order to actually teach our students about the history of the countries that speak the target language and the countries where the language originated. So you have to talk about colonialism. You have to talk about those countries that did this, like the patterns of migration. Why is it that there are communities that speak a particular language in places that students might not have considered? And we have to teach them that speaking a language doesn't equate with you being a specific race, and that there's plenty of diversity in who speaks specific languages. And speaking a language accentless doesn't necessarily mean that you are a native of that language. So we have to use our identities as a base for teaching these things to our students, because it's not very obvious for them, especially given the way folks are represented in the media. We have to consider how the media operates here in the US and how it operates in countries where the target language is spoken. We have to address those things.
Okay, thank you so much. So, if everyone could mute themselves right now, that would be great. Thank you. I feel like we could just do a 2-hour discussion on this. This is, we never have enough time to talk about it, but thank you so much for engaging in these rich conversations. And I know as world language teachers, we're going to keep this at the forefront, you know, in our classes this year and in everything we do. And we're going to talk a lot more about this as we go forward in this PD as well. So thank you all. Okay, I am going to move back here. So let's dive right into the session, can-do statements, the practical application of today's session. These are our objectives, and I'll pause just to let you read these quickly.
All right. So the first part, high leverage strategies, the ways in which we can adapt our practice to deliver equitable, high quality, engaging lessons remotely.
Several guiding principles. Here are several guiding principles on how to effectively promote student achievement. And the way to keep it all organized is to remember the ABCs of high leverage strategies. So adapt. While we don't know exactly what learning will look like this year, keep in mind what your students can do and help support them towards higher proficiency. Build connections with students. This is paramount. Remember Maslow before Bloom, and teachers, remember that for yourselves as well. Cultivate routines to facilitate student-centered learning by setting clear expectations. Design and plan. Prepare your lesson with a proficiency focus. Engage. Appeal to your students' interests and curiosities when preparing lessons and activities. And so here are some strategies to navigate online teaching this year. I'll pause for a minute so that you can have a chance to take a peek, and then you can review this later on your own time in more depth. I'd like you to keep in mind your audience as well, Generation Z, and the implications for teaching and learning with this group of students. I'll pause for a minute as well and have you read some of these on your own.
Okay.
Remember, oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say in this slide to remember that our students are experienced with being online, but they're not proficient in online practices. So that's something that we need to teach them. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries, Daly. So as you can see, technology is incredibly important, and there's a huge selection of digital tools we can utilize for transformational learning when teaching remotely. In fact, many digital resources are available to you through Google Tools or in your BPS Clever backpack. However, it is not necessary to use them all. Be simple. Stick with one or two tools you feel comfortable with and that can effectively communicate the instructional goal and measure students' progress. If you need support with using the range of technology tools available, there are asynchronous training videos available on the BPS OIIT webpage. And also, if you didn't know, you can schedule one-on-one coaching sessions with a member of the digital learning team. All right, so knowing that technology is important, it's also undeniable that remote teaching and learning has significant impact. We need to consider how it's impacting our students. So stepping back from our power and privilege, we got to think about the ways remote learning is difficult and emotionally challenging for our learners. So this slide here is a really wonderful just breakdown of identifying teachers as guests in our students' lives in this learning journey remotely. So please come back and just read what this educator has to say about teaching remotely and being guests in our students' experience. And to make the point even more clear visually, just look at these images here on this slide. In short, the point is to say, we may not have the full understanding of the barriers limiting our students' online learning experiences. Plainly, don't require our students to have their cameras on. Be compassionate. It's just not our place. We are guests on this journey.
So on this slide, here are some strategies to promote a positive learning environment and some ways to build community with your students. Call students by name with the correct pronunciation. That's very important. Include personal connections. We've included a link here for some getting to know you activities that you can check out after our session is done today. Make time for individual check-ins by allowing students to schedule time either on your calendar, or you could meet with them one-on-one in a breakout session during your class. Ask students about their interests in each unit theme and ensure to embed these interests in your lessons. Use the simplest tool for you to optimize how you deliver instruction and achieve the learning objectives. There's so much out there, it's easy to become overwhelmed. And if there's a tool that you have used, that you are good at, you feel comfortable with, use that. Remember, keep it simple. So we've included 2 links here. This is a chart of Google tools with linked tutorials for your own learning. You can also copy to share these tutorials with students and families. And we've also included a way to enable automatic captioning for your students that may need additional support. Here we have some more resources to help with your classroom setup and to support students. Each is aligned to one of the ABCs of high leverage practices. So take a look at these on your own, and we think you'll find them useful as you begin the year.
Okay, so remember, design and plan, prepare your lessons with proficiency focus. And to support you with this, here's a lesson plan template you might consider using. There's space here for you to map out your lesson goals, define how your students will demonstrate proficiency, identify the digital tools to make the lesson cohesive online, and what you will do to analyze and measure students' progress. If you would like to use this lesson plan template, there's the option to download and edit a PDF version and a Google Slide version of the template. This Google Slide version is like a digital lesson plan book, so you can add as many lesson pages you would like, and they'll be easy to access in one document.
So ideas for the first week of school. We want to engage students from day 1. When students feel involved, they're more receptive to adapting to your classroom routines and their responsibilities with ease. So here are some strategies. You could send out a welcome or an introduction video on Flipgrid. You could create Google Slides with a virtual locker of all your favorite things, and maybe students would want to do the same. You could create an interactive syllabus with links. This is a link that we've included in the slide talking about what successful language learners do, and you can use this in your class as well. Teach your students about language proficiency levels. Hold office hours. Find reasons to celebrate virtually, such as birthdays, achievements, etc. Here are some more strategies. I had told you at the beginning, lots of links. We want you to really delve into these. Getting to know you activities, tips to engage your students. The choice boards that you see down here, this gives students agencies over how to learn a topic or a concept. This freedom encourages them to be more responsible, accountable, and independent in their learning. So we're talking about equity. We want students to be able to exercise what they know in a way that is most comfortable for them. And it's also a way to differentiate in your classroom. If you're working with a group of students, another group could be on these choice boards choosing to work on anything that is of interest to them.
So many of the ideas Julie mentioned are great examples of how to incorporate high leverage strategies into your practice. An excellent resource of fundamental high leverage strategies can be found on the Teaching Works site. They detail basic strategies for delivering high quality instruction and how to support students' social, emotional, health, and wellness. For high level strategies specific to supporting students with language disabilities and world language, in the notes section of this slide, you will find a link to a PDF resource package from the Virginia Department of Education. It contains a wealth of useful strategies and techniques.
And I like to use that particular link to share with families, because we are talking about equity. We're talking about, students with disabilities have the right and should be in every world language class. And so if your administration or families give pushback on this, I would share this link with them, this PDF, which clearly outlines that all students have the right to be in a world language class.
All right, let's talk about standards and alignment. Using ACTFL can-do statements to facilitate proficiency-based instruction.
So here are the world language national standards, the ACTFL standards. And I know that everybody is familiar with these. So in the communication area, we have 3 modes: interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational. Our Massachusetts state standards, which are 20 years old, as you all know, they have been revised, and we are aligning them to these ACTFL national standards. So right now, DESE is going to release them for public comment in October, and then we hope to have them officially approved in January of 2021, at which time we'll be doing extensive PD on these new standards. But the great thing is that the new Massachusetts state world language standards embed a lot of socio-emotional wellness standards woven throughout them all. So be on the lookout for those coming in January. Let's watch this short video on how to implement the standards.
Learning languages prepares us to connect in the multilingual and multicultural world we share. ACTFL and 16 other language organizations collaborated to create the World Readiness Standards for Learning Languages. Recently, the standards were modified to focus on literacy.
Sorry, let me just make this a full page here.
Real-world applications of language, and 21st century skills. These standards serve as a roadmap to guide learners to communicate effectively and interact with global competence while participating in communities locally and globally. Supporting this vision are 5 goal areas, also known as the 5 C's: communication, cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities. Integrating these goal areas into instructional programs helps students become world-ready educated citizens. Within the 5 C's are the 11 content standards that describe the knowledge and abilities students should acquire throughout their language education. Let's take a look at the goal areas and the content standards. The communication goal is divided into 3 content standards, describing the 3 modes or purposes of communication. The interpersonal mode for interacting with others and negotiating meaning, the interpretive mode for understanding and analyzing what is heard, read, or viewed, and the presentational mode for creating messages to inform, explain, persuade, or narrate. Each mode addresses how learners speak, write, listen, view, and use media, anytime, anywhere, with anyone. How can we measure student growth towards this goal? The World Readiness Standards include sample performance indicators that allow students and teachers to reflect on and track progress in all 3 modes of communication using can-do statements. These statements describe real-life applications of language, showing what learners can do at each stage from novice to intermediate to advanced. And now let's talk about the other 4 C's. These outline what students do with the language and how they utilize it in a wide variety of contexts. In the Cultures and Comparisons content standards, students use the target language to investigate, explain, and reflect on aspects of language and how cultural perspectives influence our practices and products. In the Connections content standards, students build critical thinking and problem-solving skills, and they also access and evaluate diverse perspectives. In the Communities content standards, students use the language within and beyond the classroom, as well as set goals and reflect on their progress. And how can we observe student progress in these goal areas? The World Readiness Standards include sample progress indicators. Sample progress indicators are specific to student age and language level, acknowledging that learners' cognitive and maturity levels may not match their language abilities. This means that even though learners at the same proficiency level have similar language abilities, the tasks they perform with the language change based on their age, experience, and interests. In review, the World Readiness Standards are organized around the 5 C's, with sample performance indicators for identifying what learners can do in communication, and sample progress indicators demonstrating a wide variety of applications using language. Combined, these elements show us what learners should know, be able to do, and how well they can do it. The standards help learners understand their growing ability to communicate effectively and interact with global competence, and provide language educators at all levels a clear roadmap to follow in order to guide their students to a place of world readiness. This
So just very quickly, the actual core practices are here. And when we think about best practices, we think about, what are the practices that are good for teachers to do? But core practices, on the other hand, are the essentials for world language teachers. So think of the distinction as the nice to haves versus the must haves. These research-based high leverage teaching practices are considered core because they are essential for educators to employ in order for their learners to acquire a language. Neglecting any of these would result in learners really not being fully prepared. The American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, ACTFL, has adopted these 6 practices, and they assert that they are the key to success in building student language proficiency.
Okay, now let's take a look at a lesson example that draws upon our core instructional practices. So this lesson here focuses on 2 types of communication, interpretive and presentational. For today's learning session, I will focus only on the interpretive communication of authentic language using a video source. So during an interpretive task, our learners are asked to show what they can do with a target language by answering comprehension questions like defining key terms, identifying the main idea, supporting details, and sharing their cultural perspectives. Remember, our core instructional practices guide us to plan with authenticity, focus on communication in the target language, analyze and measure students' progress, then reflect and assess. So briefly, as we overview this big idea of the lesson here, the objective here was that students were studying El Cuerpo, and that I asked them to use, to watch a video and to be able to identify key details from an informational video. Achieving the purpose, as I mentioned, I chose an authentic resources, and then I used that to identify tasks to see what students could do with their target language knowledge. To monitor and measure their progress, I use the Edpuzzle application to create an interactive video lesson. And Edpuzzle integrates really easily with Google Classroom. And when you have more time, I would just like you to come back to this actual lesson planner so you can see more how I set up the lesson with a proficiency focus and the steps I took to monitor students' understandings and extend their practice. So I want to talk now about Edpuzzle and why I really think it's an effective digital tool to develop students' interpretive skills in the target language. So as I mentioned, Edpuzzle integrates with Google Classroom, so it's seamless. When you make the assignment, it'll populate in your Google Classroom Assignments tab. And importantly, it allows you to create interactive content from pre-existing YouTube videos. You can then personalize your videos by cropping it to focus just on the content that you want. Also, there are options to add audio and text notes for your students. You can create open response and multiple choice questions. And so keeping proficiency as a basis for this lesson, I use this checklist to organize and structure my planning. So first, is this task student-centered? So yes, the task addresses the learning needs of students and it's interesting and it's relevant. Is the task using an authentic resource? In this case, yes. I chose a popular she's a YouTuber, content creator, she's from Spain. She's big in the fitness and wellness world, and I used one of her videos on stretching to incorporate. Is the task proficiency focused? Yes. So students have to transmit their understanding of the video content. And then lastly, does it promote their intercultural competence? And yes, the students here have to show their awareness of wellness and fitness practices in a target language community. So there's so many digital tools to promote interpretive communication. While I personally like Edpuzzle, there are also options to use your Google tools. There's VoiceThread, Vimeo, Animoto, there's so many things. But just remember, keep it simple. When you design your interpretive lessons, okay, just keep the proficiency checklist in your mind and choose a tool when working remotely that best serves your learning objective purpose and helps you measure students' progress. If you look to the right of the slide here, to support you, we included some additional resources to help you plan and organize for interpretive tasks. All right, let's get into looking at presentational tasks. Importantly, I want to discuss and describe how I would adapt a lesson that I created for an in-person learning activity for now an online learning experience. So this lesson here focuses on two types of communication, interpersonal and presentational. Just for today, I'll focus on the presentational communication piece. For presentational communication, learners are prepared to communicate in the target language about a familiar topic while demonstrating linguistic and cultural competence. Going back to our core practice as a reference, let's look at the big idea of what's going on in this lesson. So the objective here for presentational mode is that students can talk about places of interest in La Perla, Puerto Rico, and give their opinion about what La Perla is like. To achieve the purpose, I would use an online digital presentational tool like Google Slides or like maybe Nearpod when teaching remotely, so to provide that background context for students about La Perla. Later on, students would deliver presentations in Spanish about La Perla, Puerto Rico using Flipgrid, okay? And there's more like details in this lesson that I would like you to go back to learn more about so you can see what else I would do to prepare students for the presentational tasks. I won't talk about them now, but they're here for you to come back and to see. And also my lesson materials for this plan for La Perla, Puerto Rico is also linked on the next slide. The point being here is that keep the approach proficiency focused and use the technology tool that best serves your learning objective. So I mentioned that I would use Flipgrid to assess students' presentational skills. So why? I like Flipgrid because it allows me to post the prompt or the question with either text or audio. And then students can then respond in the target language, and they also have the option to use filters, stickers, and the whiteboard tools to make their thinking visible. I can also in Flipgrid design an interactive rubric to score and provide student feedback. It's a really one push button, it sends it right away. I love that. And if you're interested on what I use for this prompt, again, in another slide on this one, you'll see the links for lesson materials. All right, so basically the idea is keep in mind that there's so many tools that we can access to help us with remote teaching and learning and to really focus on students' presentational communication skills. While I have personal experience and like Flipgrid, you may want to consider Google tools like Docs or Slides. There's Audacity, Screencastify, Loom, QuickTime, WeVideo, Padlet. Again, keep it simple. When planning, keep this presentational proficiency checklist guide in mind. And again, to the right, you'll find more resources to support you preparing presentational tasks. And I've also included lesson materials for La Perla, Puerto Rico assignment.
So we'll now focus on how to create standards-aligned, student-centered learning experiences that affirm their racial, linguistic, and cultural identities, and to develop their intercultural competence.
All right, so getting into the CLSP part of our discussion for today. CLSP asks us to draw upon students' knowledge and perspective to promote cultural competence and educational equity. What it requires is adopting these values. Teaching culture is routine. Vetting instructional materials to make sure they are relevant and authentic. Valuing students as knowledge banks, especially students of color or students categorically underrepresented due to systemic oppression. Again, to learn more about ending racism and educational inequities, At the beginning of the presentation, Julie and I have provided a robust list of resources that was curated by our Office of Opportunity Gap, and that's on slide number 13.
Okay, so teaching culture in the world language classroom, myth versus reality. Myth, most of my students are non-white. I don't really need to teach about culture and diversity.
Reality, even if diversity is visible, students need explicit teaching about culture, as they may not have had experience to counter their assumptions or uncover their misconceptions.
Myth, I don't teach about culture and diversity because I'm worried about making a mistake or offending someone.
Reality, make time to do the work. Mistakes are human, but you must take ownership of your areas of growth. Read, research, and challenge your biases.
Myth, I don't have time to teach culture all the time. I do bring up culture during certain times of the year, Multicultural Day, Black History Month.
Reality, teaching about culture does not solely mean pause regular instruction. Teaching culture and diversity must be adopted as regular instructional practice.
Myth, we are one human race. We should focus on what unites us, not what makes us different.
Reality, this belief is fear of addressing conflict. Students need to learn about differences in worldview and be able to grapple with differences in productive ways. All right, so how do we keep culture at the center of instruction? First, we create learning experiences, drawing on students' own cultural backgrounds, understandings, and point of view. Design lessons that raise students' awareness about their own cultural identities and those of the target language communities. And we use the ACTFL intercultural communicative competencies to set the can-do statements for context and purpose. All right, so foundation to teaching culture is using the 3 Ps: products, practices, and perspectives. To explain, here's a really short video to expound upon this point.
PPP. 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 What's that? It's a way to understand culture. Culture is a combination of products,
practices,
and perspectives. PPP. A product is a thing or idea produced by a culture, like a to-go coffee cup,
a stainless steel French fry fork,
or Moroccan bread. A practice is what people do within a culture. Practices are like when Mexicans stay after dinner and just talk.
When people in Germany prefer to eat sitting at a table with a knife and fork.
When people remove their shoes before entering homes.
A perspective is a belief or a value held by a culture.
It's why people do what they do.
First,
so further to our discussion on CLSP, we've included these 2 links on this slide. The CLSP Continuum, created by the BPS Office of Opportunity Gap. And then there's also this cultural dimensions checklist that you can use to ensure you're embedding CLSP into your practice. You can take a look at those links on your own.
So just to show you visually here and make the point clear, teaching culture for us is not new. The difference is we're asking you all today to think about culture with a proficiency focus and designing our lessons to promote deeper knowledge about the target language community, particularly the products, practices, and perspectives. Sometimes we just focus on the products, just the things of the culture, but it's just push along your cultural discussion to include the practices and also perspectives. All right, so building up your CLSP practice in world language is asking you to be actionable, just being authentic, choosing resources that reflect diverse representations across race, sex, belief, and sexual orientation, be relevant, connect to the students, be proficiently focused, focus on communication and target language, be measured. So culture is not just once in a while it occurs, it's an actual lesson activity or task that is measured and assessed, and then be progressive, moving our students along that continuum of the 3 Ps, not just practices, but also practices and perspectives. Okay, so here we've prepared a short little activity to show how you might incorporate teaching culture to build for an intercultural competency skill, you can choose for yourself to use another type of source material, whether it be visual or print, as your authentic resource. The key is with the authentic resource is to use these guiding questions we provided to make sure that you're using CLSP framework into your cultural lessons. So thinking about how will you engage students in the lessons? How will you encourage them to be respectful of different perspectives of cultural representations? How does the lesson develop students' knowledge and connection with native speakers from the target language culture? How will you allow students to demonstrate their competence of learning through the lesson? And then how will you build on the lesson, develop students' functional skills across the 3P continuum? So let's watch the video, and then as you're watching, think about how you might imagine using a similar tool with your students.
Baby Buddha, chicken, crispy, crispy.
Traditions, new choices. Enjoy it all as McDonald's brings you a delicious selection of the Macarabia, made with authentic Arabic flavors. Macarabia, true to tradition.
Great. So besides making you hungry, I hope the video prompted some ideas about how to teach culture in your class. Remember, teaching culture in our classes is regular practice. It's proficiency focused, and it's measurable.
We just wanted to include, if you want to learn more about CLSP, there's a 3-part series on it. The first person to present was Dr. L.J. Randolph. Unfortunately, that took place on Saturday, but there are 2 more sessions here. And here is the link. It's free. You can sign up for this online webinar, which is really quite good.
All right, so at this point, just reflect for a couple seconds here about ways in which you are going to deepen your practice with a cultural, linguistically sustaining practice approach.
So yes, we can. Let's review our session can-do statements and the application of today's learning goals to see if we met them. At the end of today's session, I now can recognize high leverage strategies for remote teaching. Check. Plan a standards-aligned lesson for remote teaching. Check. Ensure my lesson contains CLSP practices. Check. We didn't want to leave our session without telling you about the BPS World Languages resources page for remote learning. These were tools created from March to April of this year. They were put on the BPS website. I'm not sure anyone saw them, so here they are. We will be continuing to add to this bank of tools and resources throughout this school year as well. So, we want to honor that we are letting you out on time at 12 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining our session.
Thank you so much for being here, and hopefully you learned about a technique or resource that you believe that you'll be comfortable using to support your student engagement and learning outcomes. Everyone, be compassionate with yourselves. We're all in this together.
Yes, absolutely. Keep it simple and be sure to practice Maslow before Bloom's for yourself as well, because teachers are so important. We value you, and we completely are supporting you this year and want you to know that. So this is our last slide here, the exit ticket. We want to hear from you. Please take the time to complete this. Let us know what you learned and how you would like to apply some of these strategies to support your students during remote instruction. By filling this out, it will automatically go to TeachPoint and you will receive your required PD hours for this session. And I am going to stop sharing and just come back to all of you and get out of this. Okay, here we are. So thank you very much, everybody. And in the interest of time, we will, Akila and I will look through the chat. We will put it all onto a Google Doc. We'll answer every single question that's on there, and we will send it to everybody. We've got a list of all the participants. We'll send it out to you. And we just want to say, have a great school year. We value you, and thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Be well, guys. Take good care.
Well, thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Thank
you.
So everything that you have, if you can share it with me, including your Google Classroom, your syllabus, your grade, all the
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
It says my access is denied.
My norms are like always my go-to.
Could everyone
they
turn
make
their
good conversation, so they help to
Go
kind
ahead,
of shape
I'm listening.
the direction in which your class is going to go. So
Access is denied to the link. I can't get the link because I keep getting access is denied.
Are you using your BPS sign-in for it?
Yes,
And which link are you talking about?
the one to today's presentation.
Oh. Okay, I will make sure that that is changed for you. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
I think
Thank
we
you very much.
disabled the links because there were a lot of people in the slides. But that came, I will make sure that that happens, and I'll actually send this whole presentation out to everyone just to ensure that you get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks for taking my question. I appreciate
No problem
both
at
of you
all.
very much.
Okay. Any other quick questions before we go?
It's the session name because I'm filling out the exit ticket.
Okay.
May I have the exit ticket on the chat, please?
I'm talking and answering and I'm muted. I didn't realize, sorry. The session title is Best Practices in World Language, in the World Language Classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see it there?
Let me put the exit ticket right into the chat.
Yes, please.
Yes.
And Stephanie, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure why you're not able to access because it's open to anyone with the BPS ID. So hopefully Julie can send it to you directly so you can get a copy of it. We'll work that out.
Okay, let me.
And you were able to find the exit ticket?
I put the exit ticket in the chat.
But the name of the presentation?
The name of the presentation?
Yeah, I think it's listed there as Best Practices in the World Language Classroom. The last time I looked.
I didn't see it though.
No, you don't have to manually write it in. It's there, Mr. Daly. Let me look again. I definitely saw it there.
I'm putting the name right in.
No, it's there. I remember seeing it.
Okay.
Just give me a second to check. Is it High Leverage Strategies?
High Leverage Teaching Strategies for Remote Learning through an Equity Lens. I just put it in the chat, the title. Hopefully on Cadence it was listed that way?
No, it's listed differently, and the way they created the exit ticket form, so the name is not there.
No.
I'm going to stop recording right now, but we can stay on. So I'm just going to hit.
Okay, it's called, sorry, it's called Remote